Today was day 14 of the Karen Read trial. I'm going to give you my part 2 recap with Jen McCabe's testimony. The judge helped speed up a little bit of this testimony. All of the repetitive stuff that we've heard a million times about the basketball game and then Waterfall, blah, 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 we are able to skip through that. She arrives to Waterfall about 9 p.m. and there's a crew of people there. She meets up with her sister and her brother-in-law shows up and everybody's there and having a good time. On the stand, she says that John was her friend. She loved John. He was an amazing guy, and she had been friends with him for about 10 years. She was introduced to Karen by John in the summer of 2020. She suffers from MS, so John wanted to introduce her to Karen because Karen also suffers from MS. An early part of the testimony that I thought was interesting was she said that Brian Jr. didn't come out that night to the waterfall, even though it was his birthday, because he suffers from anxiety and he was really struggling. So he stayed back at the house to celebrate with his friends. He also mentioned that he struggles with anxiety when he didn't look out the window at his house when all the commotion was going on. We get the lunch break, and then when they come back from lunch, we start getting the questioning about them leaving the waterfall bar. She said that she said, Karen, come with me, because she saw that John was stuck speaking with her husband, and her husband is a talker. She didn't know how long it was going to take, so she was telling Karen to come with her. John O'Keefe ends up coming outside, so they ride together, and she waits for her husband, and her husband ride to 34 Fairview. She gets a text from John saying, "Where to?" This is the first time we see one of the text messages from John O'Keefe, and he is on his way to 34 Fairview. She tries to give him back a response, but I think she said she ends up calling him to tell him, and she was referring to the friend Bella that we heard about before that lives close by, and said it's right here after Bella's house. We then learned that John at one point had a relationship with Bella's mother. After that, she texts here, asking if they're here, and then says, "Pull behind me" at 12:31. At 12:40, she texts, "Hello." She's not sure if they left or they were still outside, but she had been able to see their car positioned in front of the house. So she looked back out the window and then ends up texting him, "Where are you?" at 12:42. At 12:45, she texts him hello. And the next text message says, "Please answer" at 4:59. I guess Karen was not at Jen's house yet that morning, but maybe she had already heard from Karen. One of the texts that I thought was kind of weird was she said, "Karen is worried, we need to find you." And if I was looking for my friend, I wouldn't say that we need to find you. I'd be like, "Where are you? What the hell are you doing?" After 5 a.m., she texts, "Please answer so we know you're okay." She testifies that he never answered any of those texts and he never came inside the house at 34 Fairview. We backtrack a little bit and we hear from her point from when they got back to her house. Her and Matt got back to their house after they dropped off those two friends. She said she asked Matt if he wanted to watch a show. He said no. So he went to bed and she was just like on her phone researching stuff. I guess like she was looking up her daughter's like new basketball team. She had sent a text to one of her sisters and then texted her husband in a group chat. But how does she know that? I don't even know what I did last night after 11 p.m. And she goes to sleep. She's woken up to a phone call from Kaylee, who is John's niece, because Karen, I guess, did not have Jen McCabe's phone number, and she can hear Karen screaming in the background. John didn't come home, where is he? Says, "Could I have hit him?" In one of these early phone calls. Then she gets up, her husband is up, she goes down to make a coffee, and she sees that Karen is coming inside the house. She thinks that John had potentially just fallen asleep on a friend's couch, but she volunteers to go out and look for him with Karen because Karen is so frantic. She says that she had cracked her taillight. They walk outside of her house and Carrie Roberts had pulled up, and apparently Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts had only met one other time before, and they talk about that. Then they go over to John O'Keefe's house to see if he's there, and it shows video surveillance from the Ring camera that Jen McCabe was driving Karen's car home, and they pull up at the house. She says at that point, Karen showed her the broken taillight, but you never see that on the surveillance footage from the Ring. They end up searching inside John O'Keefe's house, and Kaylee, the niece, is there, and she promises her that she would find John and everything is going to be okay. At this point, the camera pans to Karen Reed and she is like staring dead at Jen McCabe. It was like a stare off. This is what the surveillance footage looked like when they drove home in Karen's car, and that car is Carrie Roberts. Then shows this photo to her with the broken taillight and asks if this is what the car looks like, and she said, and they showed this photo with the dent here above the broken taillight as well. You see a little bit of the police cruiser dash cam video, and that shows like the conditions of snow and it being super dark. But eventually they drive over to 34 Fairview. I guess that was Karen's idea. It was dark outside and Carrie Roberts was driving and Jen McCabe was in the front seat, and in the back, kind of like in the middle of the two of them, was Karen Reed. So I guess she was like still very frantic in the car saying, could I have hit him? This is what Jen is saying about Karen. They drive in the dark, they approach the Albert home, and McCabe says that Reed shouted, "There he is," and began banging on the car door to get let out. So Jen says that Karen runs over to him and John is flat on his back. But in the 911 call, we did learn that he had been flipped over, according to her. So that's a little bit of a discrepancy. She says that Carrie Roberts begins wiping the snow off John, and she could not believe what she was seeing. She couldn't believe that she was seeing John laying there. This is when she called 911, and Karen Reed and Carrie Roberts began CPR. They went to the back of Carrie's car to look for towels and blankets, and they were waiting for first responders. I found this point to be very interesting because if this happened in front of my sister's house, my first thing would be to run into my sister's house and say, we need to get John in here. He's freezing cold outside. Let's try to warm him up. Do you have the blankets? Like, this is your sister's house. And the way the lawn is, some of the images make it look really big, but it wasn't a very large front lawn. Officer Seraph is one of the first police officers to arrive right after about 6:10 or 6:11 a.m. The EMTs arrive as well, and they begin working on John, and the officer starts asking Karen what happened, and Jen McCabe says that at this point Karen told the officer that she hit him. This is when we learned the explanation for her Google search that was how long to die in the cold, but spelled wrong. She says that while John was getting into the ambulance with the EMTs, Karen asked Carrie, is he dead? Then she grabbed Jen's hand and asked to Google hypothermia and see how long it takes to die in the cold. So that is how she's explaining it. We have that search being pinned to her Google at 2:27 a.m., but she's saying that it happened here after 6 a.m. At this point, the officers tell her to go wake up your sister. We need to figure out what's going on. The door was unlocked to the house. She went inside, went up the stairs and to her sister and her brother-in-law's bedroom and woke them up. She doesn't recall if the dog Chloe was there. They both wake up and she tells them that John was just found dead on the front lawn. Brian Albert is so confused. She says that he even asked, who is John? They get dressed and Officer Lank is there waiting for him for an interview. She says that she knew Officer Lank from Canton. He was like 5 or so years older than her, but they went to the same high school. And she spoke with Officer Lank at the hallway, then they moved over to the kitchen area. During that kind of conversation, Brian and Nicole Albert are there for it, and this is when Matt McCabe ended up arriving. She said that she called him to come over to the house when she was going in to wake up her sister and her brother-in-law. She stayed at the house for a while. She waited for the state police to come. Julie Albert had also come over. She was shocked to find out what had happened, and Brian Higgins comes over as well. We don't have court on Monday. That's going to be a day off, and Tuesday will be a half day, but she's going to have a nice long weekend to talk with her husband and learn about those damning text messages, and then we'll have the defense questioning her then.